The song that I came to sing remains unsung to this day. I have spent my days in stringing and in unstringing my instrument. The time has not come true, the words have not been rightly set. Only there is the agony of wishing in my heart. The blossom has not opened, only the wind is sighing by. I have not seen his face, nor have I listened to his voice. Only I have heard his gentle footsteps from the road before my house. The livelong day has passed in spreading his seat on the floor, but the lamp has not been lit, and I cannot ask him into my house. I live in the hope of meeting with him, but this meeting is not yet. Rabindranath Tagore. Welcome to the Lost Traveler Podcast, Season 2 premiere. Very excited to have all my listeners. We're now in 24 countries around the world with over 1,000 listeners and couldn't be happier. So thank you all for your support. It's meant the world, and it's been a great year, very interesting year all over the world. And I've met a lot of people. And I'm very excited to have my very special guest, Mitali Deparkesla, today, who is the international best-selling author and business book expert. She's been a ghostwriter for years of pretty major works for the business community in networking and people getting their voices heard. I am thrilled to know you and to call you a new friend. So welcome so much to The Lost Traveler.
Thank you for having me, Henry Cameron. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks. Well, so tell me a little bit about your background and share just in brief your biography, where you're from and your family and sort of what led you to where you are now.
Okay.
I know you've had an amazing story and I'm excited to dig deep.
Yes, gosh, I have to. I think the problem for me is almost needing to cherry pick the stories. There's so many that we could be here for hours. So it's the difficulty for me I always find is what do I say and what do I leave out? So where did it start? So my parents are Indian Bangladeshi immigrants to the UK. It was an arranged marriage. But they seemed happy for the first few years anyway. Things kind of soured a little bit after that, but that's relationships for you. Kids will usually do it, you know, put a huge pressure on parents. And then they had me. I'm the oldest of 4 children. One of my earliest memories is my very first day at nursery. In the US, it'd be kindergarten, but we call it nursery here in the UK. And I had no concept that I was in a country where Bengali wasn't the first language. Being the oldest, my parents spoke Bengali to each other and they spoke Bengali to me. So I was growing up speaking Bengali and assuming that it is the main language that people speak. So when I went off to nursery, I was speaking Bengali to all these kids who must have thought I was the strangest thing ever. I also, I was brought up in a place called Gateshead in the United Kingdom, which is not very multicultural. Even now, it isn't hugely multicultural, but back then, which was the early 80s, it was, well, I was the only brown kid in the whole of nursery.
Amazing.
So I was already seen as quite strange. And then here I come, this strange looking brown girl speaking a very strange language that nobody could understand. So my mother tells me I just ran off into the corner library and just buried myself in a book. And I don't really remember this, but I assume I must have figured out quite quickly that I wasn't able to communicate to all these children. That must have annoyed me. And somewhere I managed to make the link between my inability to communicate and books. So I must have thought if I can just read every single book in this library, then I'll be able to speak this strange language that everybody else is able to speak. Now, I don't really have any memory of that, but my mother tells me that after that, for the whole year that I was in nursery, as soon as she would drop me off, I would run off to the corner library. And when she'd pick me up a few hours later, I was still in the corner library, and they had to go and buy new books because I read all the books very quickly. So that's where my story begins.
How did your teachers handle that? Do you remember how you were treated, or were you treated any differently by your teachers?
Gosh, I don't remember being. That's my early memories are quite fuzzy, Henry Cameron. So I find it very difficult. I don't really remember. I would say later on, however, as I was going into my tweens and my teens, then yes, I was treated differently in a good way, in that I felt I was sheltered. Yeah, I felt my teachers sheltered me a lot, and just felt like, she's different in a good way, not in a nasty way. I also grew to be quite overweight. I had really bad acne, and I was targeted for bullying. So I was very grateful to have teachers who, would shield me as much as they possibly can from that. It did mean that I had quite a lonely teenage years, quite lonely. I don't recall having any friends or anyone that I really hung out with. It's almost like it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I was being protected by the teachers to ensure I wasn't bullied, but at the same time, I became a bit of a teacher's pet, and none of the cool kids like that. They don't want to hang around.
It sounds like you put a force field around.
They did.
Kept the kids at bay. I was not having had the same kind of experience, but I grew up all over the world and attended international or American schools, and so I was surrounded by kids from all cultures all over the world, and I never really had a sense of the differences between us.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what language we spoke. It didn't matter how we looked. There were kids who came into our group, into our class, from Indonesia and from India and from Korea and Japan, and name the country. They were there because we were in the capital city, and the diplomats' kids all came to the same school. And I remember feeling from an early age, a very broad sense of a global community. And so I'm always interested to hear from the other side of that experience, what it was like. However, the common ground there was that I was an overweight kid. I had really bad skin. I didn't feel like I had a lot of friends. And like you, I found my solace in the libraries, in the books, and really going into the worlds of other people's experiences and imaginations, and therefore finding my own sense of self, what I resonated with, the things that I felt that I was gifted in, that I could follow in my heart, because the guidance counselor in school did not point me in any direction.
No, I don't remember mine being all that good either. I don't know whether it's a generational thing, and maybe they're brilliant now. I've got no idea. But yeah, my guidance counselor wasn't. We call them careers counselors here. And I don't recall getting any good career advice from her, unfortunately.
Well, we have a pretty broad spectrum of ages who listen to this podcast. And is there anything that you would offer up to someone in their teens or in their adolescence or young adulthood who have those career counselors who are, I think, still across the board almost very, very sort of low skill level in terms of guidance, how to guide young people on an individual path that they may feel called to? How does a young person now, today in the 21st century, handle that, do you think?
Well, it's a two-step thing, I would say. First of all, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was growing up, I think what guidance counselors were thinking of is they were just thinking in terms of what is a viable solution. So, if for someone like me who was academic, it was an instant, well, you should go to university. There wasn't really a huge emphasis on really what I should do at a university. It's just, you should just go. You know, never mind that you're going to get into horrible amounts of debt that you're going to be paying off for so, you know, so many years after you graduate. It was just the done thing. If you're academic, you go and you do that, you know, you go to university. So I would say the first step is don't just act like a lemming, you know, just because this is what everybody else is doing. You know, think about what it is that you really want. And if you're not sure what you really want, then think about what you have fun with. You know, if
Yeah.
you're a teenager, I mean, first of all, I'm jealous. You're at the start of your life. But secondly, the scary thought is you have at least 60, if not more years ahead of you of service, of doing something.
That's right.
And on the one hand, it should fill you with excitement, but it should also fill you with a little bit of terror as well. In that, if you get into the wrong thing, that's a long time to be doing the wrong thing. Now, obviously, you know, you're not tied into it, but I will say the older you get, the harder and harder it is to make that change. I've been lucky in that I was able to make some huge career changes and choices that I made, mainly because I never settled down in my 30s. I had the opportunity to a couple of times, but there was just something in my head saying that it wasn't the right decision for me. And it ended up being a blessing because I didn't settle down, because I didn't have children. I was able to switch and chop and change and go, oh, I'll try this a little bit now.
Mhm.
Or I'm bored of this, I'll go and do this. Most people in the 30s onwards, they can't. Once you've, especially if you've got yourself property, if you've got children, especially,
Right.
you can't just suddenly decide, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to go and do that. Or you can do it, but it presents itself as a much more difficult challenge because you now have to navigate the fact that you've got children, you've got responsibilities, and does that fit in with you making a change? So I would say, you know, think about what is it you really, really makes you happy doing, what makes you, what is enjoyable, and go down that route as opposed to what your guidance counselor might be saying. Yes, but you know, in this village or in this town, we need these kinds of skills, and you can do that. If it's not something you would enjoy, don't do it. The other thing, the other step I would say, it's really a caveat, is I don't want to, it sounds like I've just badmouthed guidance counselors all around the world.
No, and I don't mean to do that either. I just
Joe,
I'm still have PTSD from my experience. Like,
oh, bless
but
you.
I do hear back from a lot of young people that they feel like they're being put in a box. Like you can
Yeah,
only do one thing. And part of that's not only the message from school and career counselors, but it's also from home. You know,
yeah.
parents and others who are of a generation that believed that you pick one thing and you do it until you get a gold watch at the end of your
Yeah,
retirement, right?
yeah. Yeah, I would say the flip side of that is do what your heart tells you to do, what you feel, you know, you enjoy. You can't go wrong if you enjoy something. I know people who don't earn much money at all. You know, they really do have to watch their pennies or cents if you're listening in the US or wherever you're listening in the world, but they're happy because they're spending their life doing something that they genuinely enjoy. And the way you've got to see it is you will spend more time at work making a living for yourself, whether it's a job or whether it's your own business. You'll spend more time doing that than you will do seeing your partner, seeing your children, seeing your friends, your parents. You'll spend more time doing that thing than you will do seeing your loved ones. So you better make sure it's something that you have fun in. The caveat to that is, and this is where I feel sorry for guidance counselors and parents, and I'm going to flip it a little bit and
Yeah.
talk from their point of view. The reason why they're trying to box you is there's a lot of people, especially now, but it was happening when I was growing up as well, but especially now, there's a lot of people who go onto social media, watch TV, and they just want what they see on TV. They've never really questioned, is it something they really want? There's a lot of teenagers now who want to be famous. And when you ask them, what is it you want to be famous for? And it's always the same things. It's always, I want to be famous for acting and singing and dancing. And not saying there's anything wrong with those career moves, you know, they're not. I know you come from a theatre background, Henry Cameron,
Yeah,
so there's
yeah.
nothing wonderful. But the truth is, people who are really talented, that sort of thing, they're not dime a dozen. Okay, there's something very special about someone who's able to command an audience when they sing, when they dance, when they act.
That's why they're
And
celebrated. That's why they're celebrities, because they're
absolutely,
celebrated for that gift of being able to achieve that. There are a lot of other
absolutely.
factors: luck, knowing people, being in the right place at the right time with the right look and the right talent to match. There are so many layers to it
Yeah,
that, I think that anyone who wants to go into performing like that is going to go into performing, but also keep your options open. That thing that may make you happy in your adolescent years very likely will change by the end of your 20s, and may change
yeah,
again in your 30s, may change
yeah.
again in your 40s, right? So there's never a time when you can't make a change. Just be aware of it on the front end. I guess that's a skill that was never really talked about.
Yeah, I think we just have to, you have to make sure, and this is something that's, you know, affected me all my life. You have to be sure that your dreams are really yours.
And now a word from our newest sponsor. Stories are at the very heart of what makes us human. We each have one, and we can learn and grow from listening to each other. The Listen podcast is an exploration of the stories of Americans abroad and how they got there. If you're curious about the world and hungry for community, check out their website at www.thelistenpodcast.com or visit their Facebook group at the Listen Podcast Community.
I see a lot of young people now who want to become famous, but do they really? You know, they don't. The performers that I've seen, the ones who do really well, it's something that they do. They're the sort of people who are going into a recording studio at 3 o'clock in the morning because it's you know, and they're leaving a party because it's not important. I need to get into a recording studio and do that. The people who want to be famous for the sake of being famous, they'd rather stay at the party. So that's the difference, you know. Are you willing to put in the hard work? And I would say I think that's where guidance counselors try and put you into a box and say, oh, you should be an engineer, oh, you should be a mechanic, or you should, because they know that there's such a huge number of young people who want to go to Hollywood, who want to, how
Mhm.
many of those people actually make it? Not many. And that's why they're trying to shield you from the heartache. So don't think too badly of your parents or your guidance counselor if they're wanting to box you into something. The reason they're doing that is they're in the back of the head, they're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have somebody who's going to say, I'm going to go to Hollywood. And they're going to go, oh my God, you know, no, please
Well,
don't do that.
they look at the superficial sort of reality TV, and I don't want to name names, but there are people out there who seem just sort of devoid of any kind of personality or
Yeah.
intelligence or skill or
Talent.
and
Yeah.
talent, and they are superstars,
Yeah.
right? So that makes it look like it's very easy, but I'll tell you what, that's an act. And those people are working very, very hard to create a facade
They're
that
acting, really. I think
they're
they've got the
acting. It
worst.
is acting. Reality is not reality when it comes to
No,
television.
no. I'm a
And that's-
follower. Some people hate me for this, but I do really, really do enjoy the Real Housewives franchise. I kind of know the United States of America through Real Housewives franchise, I'm
That's
afraid to say. But I
for
do in a
better and
way
worse.
feel but I do feel quite sorry for those ladies because I kind of think when you're a proper actress, people are aware that you're portraying a character. So you could behave quite, you know, in an evil manner. And people know, but she's just playing that.
They separate the
But
character from the
yeah, but in this one, how can they separate the character from the person when you are playing you, but you're not playing you, you're playing a hyper reality version of you, and yet there is you. So now I actually feel sorry for these women because, you know, they do get a lot of hate on social media. They do, and people feel that they can do that because they go, well, that is you. The line is not as distinct as it was. You know, if I'm an actress, I'm playing a character, and that character has a completely different name to me, and she dresses differently to me, and she lives in a different part of the world, and people can make that association that, okay, this is the actress, this is the character. Right. But when you are playing you, but not you, but you, you can see where people are confused.
Well, you know, the way that you present yourself to the world is the way the world perceives you, no matter what industry you're in, no matter who you are as a person. We all go through life wearing masks. Shakespeare, the world's a stage, right?
Absolutely.
When we see this onslaught of young people, especially, who are becoming Instagram sensations and on other social media platforms, Facebook and so forth, it's really all about the like and tapping into that need, that sort of human condition of curiosity. We want to know what's going on in people's personal lives. We want to see them. Now, we don't want to see them suffer, not in a sadistic way, but I think that we're interested in what makes people tick.
Absolutely.
And how they respond to things. And when we are reflecting that to a younger population, and it's getting younger and younger and younger, you drop a kid off on the internet, you pick any red light district in the world in the 70s and 80s, and it's like leaving your child open to extreme danger, down to human trafficking and abuses. And so we have to, as parents, then be vigilant without being helicopter, put the protections in place. And that you're right, that parents and educators and counselors, they want to protect their children. And I think that in this time, that's getting harder and harder to do. Because
I don't know how parents do it now. Honestly, I don't. I would struggle.
I think well, I certainly did. Although my son was in a Steiner school. In the States, we call them Waldorf schools. And there's no media influence in these schools. There's no technology, no computers.
Oh, interesting.
No calculators, no electronic technology at all. Children are taught to think first. And then when they hit middle school, 13, 14, 15 and beyond, that's when they meet it formally in their education. But there's really this push, which makes me love it, which is why I chose that educational pedagogy for my son, because I not only wanted to protect him, but I also didn't want to rob him of his innocence, the magic of childhood. I think that's part of the conversation. My grandmother used to say, raising a child is like building a house. It's all about the foundation.
Yes.
If you have a weak foundation, that house is doomed to collapse in on itself at one point or another. And you can go in and you can reinforce and rebuild, and it's very expensive and time consuming and all of that, which how many of us have had to go through that process, right?
Absolutely.
But if you start really focused on building a solidly designed foundation, being fully aware and awake of building that foundation, the house could burn to the ground and you can more easily build it up again.
Absolutely. And I think that's why probably guidance counselors and parents want to put us in boxes later on, because unfortunately they've let that influence come in too early in our lives, because when I was growing up, I remember quite vividly, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and the teacher was going around the class and asking us what we wanted to be when we grow up. And everyone wanted to be famous, but it was quite interesting because I wanted to be a famous astronaut. I was really getting into, space. I was learning all the planets at that point and that kind of thing. So I said I wanted to be a famous astronaut, and all the kids somebody wanted to be a famous doctor, but it was a thing they were doing. And fame isn't a bad thing. All fame, if you think about it, is just recognition of a job well done. We all crave that. The issue is when you just want to be famous for the sake of being famous. That's the problem. Being famous something is absolutely fine.
Social media doesn't help that. That's part of thing is how many likes can I get?
That's it.
How
That's
many
it.
thumbs up? How many people like me
That's
today?
it.
And if people stop clicking like, or you get some thumbs down, then that can have devastating consequences for someone who's in their early development or in their early adolescence who don't have a
Huge.
strong foundation or sense of self yet. So
Huge.
I think there has to be an awareness from parents and teachers that those forces are out there. But if we recognize them, we take the upper hand and they lose their power. And if we teach
Absolutely.
children and young people how to recognize those forces outside of us, we have the sex, drugs, and rock and roll temptations, and we have the technology and industry and computers and everything else, temptation, social media, all of that, sort of pulling at us and pushing at us from both of these angles, right?
Yeah.
And if we recognize that those are there and that they're neither of them good or bad inherently, they're not evil. It's how we use them that matters. That's what
Absolutely.
makes the difference. That's, for me anyway, that's the piece that's missing in child development and young,
Yeah.
adolescent
And I think
development.
also just being very truthful to children and just I think I always think of success as like an iceberg. You know, you just see the tip of it. You don't see all the work that was done underneath the surface. So when you see, an Instagram influencer, it seems so easy what they do. They have these millions of followers and they can just say, hey, buy this lipstick, and then everyone buys it and they make a ton of money. What they don't realize, and what a lot of children don't realize, is the influencers that are doing really well, they are hard-nosed business people. They have worked hard to build up that following. They didn't just turn up one day and go, hey, and then 30,000 people are following them. That's not how it happens. And it's just being honest. If you see influencers who are making a lot of money, if you see people who are singing and dancing and making a lot of money, those people have done a lot of work beforehand to get, even the young ones.
Yeah.
I see people, there are influencers on Instagram, and they're only 16 or 17 years old, but they started at 12. So
Yeah.
if you're 12 years old right now and you come home and you do your homework and then you go and play with your friends, that Instagram influencer was on Instagram not having fun, actually generating a business, thinking, well, how do I get more likes? And not taking it personally. That's the other thing. They don't take likes and dislikes personally because they couldn't do what they do. They have a business head on. So are you prepared to do that? If you're prepared to run a business, then you could do very well on social media. But just remember, it's a business. It's not just I get on it, throw some nice clothes on, take a few snaps, and I make a lot of money. That's not how it works. Who would pay you for that? No one would pay you for that.
Your generous sponsorship and individual support of the Lost Traveler podcast benefits the Lost Travelers Club, a charitable project under the fiscal sponsorship of United Charitable, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. The Lost Travelers Club focuses primarily on the needs of parents who have outlived their beloved children. We recently launched our new Brain Candy Project wing, providing art supplies to children still struggling with critical or terminal health-related conditions. We hope to raise enough funds to launch Brain Candy, an arts and literature magazine created by and for these young people. Find out more at www.braincandy.online. Thank you.
Well, and that's the other part of it too, is that isn't talked about, is that these sponsors that you're getting, the lipstick companies and the food delivery things and all that, whatever your sponsor might be, they are also businesses, and they are sponsoring you because they have an interest in growing their business and gaining more of a following and more money as well. And so they are going to have high expectations of you, so that if you get bored or if you get distracted and you're not on the ball, then they may pull their sponsorship, right? So there's
Absolutely.
a real
It's a job. And I remember in my early 20s, I was working as an entertainment journalist. So I I was basically, it sounds like a dream come true. And it was for a while. I was being paid to just go to really nice restaurants in the northwest of England, or go to clubs, go to bars and review them. Sounds perfect, especially when you're in your early 20s, you want to be out and about. And I was being paid to go to these places, getting the best of everything, VIP treatment. And then I had to write about it. But guess what? After a few years, it started to wear me down because I couldn't drink on those nights. I had to be on the ball. I couldn't really just be in the moment and relax. I'm already thinking of the piece that I'm going to write. I'm already thinking about the pros and the cons, and I'm already weighing up the piece in my mind, ready for me to write it. So my friends had a whale of a time because I was getting them in for free and they were getting VIP treatment. I was the best friend ever in my early 20s. You definitely wanted to know someone like me. But me, myself, inside me, I actually wasn't having fun. And my long-term boyfriend actually broke up with me for that reason, because he just said, you're just not present with me. First of all, I can't seem to enjoy a weekend night with you because you have to be at some club or some bar or some restaurant that you need to be reviewing. And then when we do go there, you're not present with me because you're working, you're in work mode. So this is what I mean about seeing something glamorous. Somebody saw me when I was 22 years old. They would think, oh my God, this girl's got it made. She goes right to the front of the queue, velvet rope, let her in. She's writing for this newspaper to this week. And, I had the life that people wanted, they were envious of. And yet here I was, my long-term relationship had broken down because of it. I wasn't having fun because I literally just couldn't let my hair down and hang loose. I just couldn't. I was just constantly thinking about the next piece that I need to write, because that's what I was being paid to do. And if I didn't write a good piece, I wouldn't get paid. I was a freelance reporter. So I didn't even have a salary to fall back on. So on the surface, glamorous entertainment reporter, in the background, losing a relationship, not having fun. And this is the reality. And people need to know that, when you see these influencers, when you see people, these YouTube stars who are doing incredibly well, yes, they're having fun now, but they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the first place to get there. It didn't happen straight away for them. So
and there's a lot of pressure in that lifestyle. And especially when you are working for someone else, that means you are an ambassador for their product and their publication. Even if you are freelancing, you're not your own person. You can't present yourself in the world the way that you want to present yourself. You have an image to uphold that is representative of whoever's hired you. That goes to building those relationships out in the world as well. And that goes for every industry. I don't care what industry it is. And so that's when, and this is a great segue, by the way, because I want to talk to you about where you and I both have found ourselves. Now, me at 55, I am finding myself in a place where I am both entrepreneurial and collaborative. I'm not under anyone's thumb. And that feels really good to me.
Yeah, I bet.
And I wish I had not that I have lived in any regret whatsoever, but I wonder if in my teens or my 20s, if someone had offered that up with the skills to accompany it as a possibility to be your own person out in the world professionally. Talk a little bit about where that shift happened in you, why, when, what brought it about, and how you feel now at this stage of your life, having achieved what you've achieved on an entrepreneurial level.
No problem. So for me, I think I'd like to think that I had entrepreneurial blood inside me. I think I'm pretty sure it did, but it manifested a long way into my life before I did anything like that. So my father was very entrepreneurial. He came into this country because there was a need for telecoms engineers, and he taught himself telecoms over in India. And this was in sort of I would say late 60s, early 70s. It was the big telecoms boom. Everybody wanted a telephone in the home, and too many customers, not enough engineers to satisfy the need. So my dad saw an opportunity to be able to come into this country and make a better life for himself. He stayed with the company for over a decade. This was, you'll remember this, Henry Cameron, if you don't mind me saying, we're a similar-ish age. So you'll remember the 70s and the 80s. I know you're in different countries to me, but this was a time where racism was just, it was on the surface. At least now it's kind of it's hidden, which
Well,
is
it's
still
back.
terrible. Yeah,
It's
it's still, well, I know it's horrible, what's happened over the last year.
It
But
really is.
the thing is, back then, this is what I always say, what happened last year with Black Lives Matter and everything. It's horrible what happened, but it kind of made me feel, once I got over that, we were all shocked when we saw, that video, and it just makes you feel sick to your stomach, and you're thinking, well, how is this happening in 2020? But once I got over the horror, I actually thought this is a good thing, because we've got to the stage now where people of all colors are saying, what the hell? Like, how is this? Back in the 70s and 80s, what a lot of people, especially younger listeners, may not realize is racism was just so in the air. It was just so normal that it wasn't even, at least we try and hide it now. Racists now try and hide the fact that they're racist. Back when I was growing up, it wasn't even something to be hidden. My dad came into the UK where it was absolutely normal for shop owners to literally say to you, no, I'm sorry, I don't serve Blacks, Asians, or the Irish. And it was just, they would just say it. It wasn't, whereas now it would be covert. They would make an excuse. They'll be like, no, I'm sorry, we're just closing now. No, I'm sorry, we've got they'll make an excuse not to serve you.
Yeah.
When my dad came into the UK, no excuses were made. It was just, no, we're not serving you because you're Asian. So my dad had to deal with a lot. And when he was a telecoms engineer, he knew he was damn good at what he could do. And yet he just saw people being promoted ahead of him purely because he didn't look right. So he decided to take on this rundown little restaurant, takeaway restaurant, that was barely making £500, a week at the time. He took it on, and within 2 years, it was making so much money, he was able to put me and the other children into private school.
Wow.
So he learned everything. He didn't go on a course. He didn't do anything to learn business. He just went into it and just failed as many times as possible in the beginning. You know what they say, the best lessons you get is from failure. You actually learn more from failure than actually going on a fancy course and all that kind of thing. So he obviously had like an entrepreneurial spirit in him. I actually doubted whether I had any. For me, again, it came from, in a similar situation, being pushed into it. So my dad was pushed into running his own business because he realized, I can stay in this telecoms company for the next 20, 30 years. I am never, ever going to be promoted just because I don't happen to be white.
Right.
And that realization forced him into saying, I need to have my own business. Something similar happened to me. So I was a journalist, I was happy. And then in 2001, I was made redundant, as were a lot of journalists up and down the UK, because there was this strange new thing, Henry Cameron, called new media. Do you remember that? We now call it the internet, but it was called new media at the time. And all the editors up and down the UK, I think it happened around the world, but definitely in the UK, they just let go of all of their reporters because they just said, well, no one's going to want to read newspapers and magazines anymore. It's something that I still feel bitterly about, not just personally for me, because it completely killed my career, but also we now have this huge discourse now about fake news. And we can't believe, and I can't speak for the USA or any other country, but certainly for the UK, you can trace the rise of fake news. You can trace it all the way back to reporters losing their jobs en masse around 2001, 2002, because editors were so short-sighted. What they should have realized is the medium was changing. That's all. People still have the need and the appetite for news that has been verified and checked. They still have the appetite for it. They want it. It was just the medium that was changing. They were just moving online instead of paper and magazines. That's all it was.
Right.
But because so many journalists lost their jobs, I believe you can see the link from that and the rise of fake news. And that's why people are now getting their news from places where it's not verified and it's not checked. And that's what's causing a huge problem for society, you know, en masse. So I lost my job then, and that really set me into a huge spiral of depression. I was actually put on antidepressants for a while. It's not nice to find out at the grand old age of 25, you're a washed up has-been.
Yeah.
And that's what I was. So I ended up spending, you know, the best part of 2 decades just doing jobs that I needed to do because I needed to pay my way in this world. And that was it. And then it was in 2013, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine who runs an SEO company. His business does search engine optimization for other businesses. And he was telling me about this Google algorithm update. And I was quite rude to him, I'll be honest, Henry Cameron. I was like, what are you talking about, Alan? It's like, I'm not technically minded. Why are you even, tell me what's happening with your life? Do you have a girlfriend now? Have you managed to finally have kids? Talk to me about that kind of stuff. Why are you telling me about this Google algorithm update that I don't care about whatsoever? He said, no, Mitali, shut up and listen to me. There's an update that's happened, which means website owners can no longer just go to Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia to hire writers who are going to write their website content for them. Whereas before it was all about keywords. Now it's not. Now Google is timing people and seeing how long they spend time on a particular website. Are they reading? Are they engaging with the content? Now website owners need someone like you. This is an in for you to get back into writing. And that's when this light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, oh my God, can I finally, after all these years, get back into writing? And that spurred me into setting up my very first business, which was a content writing business. Very simple business. I just hired myself out to various website owners around the world and said, hey, I will write all your blog posts, your articles for you. And they paid me to do so. But it was out of necessity. But from that grew this huge entrepreneurial spirit that I suspected I had because I was always my daddy's girl.
Yeah.
But it was, honestly, it was well into my 30s before I realized that this is something I need to do. And I absolutely have to come back to what you said before, Henry Cameron, is I wish guidance counselors gave me that option. It's not, I don't even think it's really taught now. Now it's, if you're academic, you should be a lawyer, you should be a doctor, you should be an engineer. If you're not academic, you need to be doing something with your hands. So it's something manual. Where's the, you know, where is the business?
Right.
That's what we need to be, that's what we need to be showing kids. And then that's when this is what I mean. I don't want to badmouth social media. That's where social media really comes in. If you teach kids the business aspect of social media, then social media is wonderful. It's the concept of just being on social media for the sake of it.
Right. They think
that's
it's easy.
where it goes wrong.
And that's the genius of the people who are so-called influencers, is that they make it look easy. They're relaxed, they're having a great time, they look fabulous, they've got their ring light on their face, you know, they're doing great. But nobody is talking about what happens behind the scenes.
They are hard-nosed business people. I've met a few of them. I'm in awe of them. I met one lady, she's only 19 years old, doing incredibly well on Instagram. And I just think, I wish I had your entrepreneurial spirit when I was your age. You know, I was too busy going off the rails at 19, just partying hard, you know, and here she was building her business. And she'd been building a business since she was 16 years old. So for 3 years, when most 16 to 19-year-olds are out partying and having fun, and as soon as the weather's nice, let's go and have a barbecue, she wasn't.
That's right.
Or if she was doing it for a business. So she wasn't really enjoying it. She was doing what I was doing as an entertainment reporter, not really enjoying the parties that she's going to. She's already thinking about, yes, I'm a brand ambassador for this, so this is what I need to do. are you prepared to do that? And if the answer is no, then don't do it. Don't get into this line of work. It's not as fun as you think.
Or try it, but also go into it knowing that you have other passions, that
Yeah.
you have a whole spectrum of abilities and passions that you can tap into. I say, if you're meant to be in the entertainment industry at whatever level, whether it's social media, whether it's the theater or film, Hollywood, or reporting, whatnot, do it, and you will do it. Nobody's going to tell you not to. No one's going to do it tell you otherwise, because you're not going to listen to them no matter what they say. But I think that one of the things, and hopefully those educators and guidance counselors and parents who are listening to this podcast can take away is there are tools, especially for creative youth, that have to do with learning the business end of things. Now, they may or may not be strong or good at the business side of things, but that's where collaboration comes in. That's where hiring someone who is good at it to partner with you in that venture comes into it. And people are still hiring you to come in and help them find their voice.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think at every age, especially right now, that's why I built this podcast, because we're all pioneers. Nobody knows what's going to happen next week, right?
True.
And so we get to imagine better than what is. And a lot of people are lacking in those skills to be able to put their voice forward.
Yeah.
Able to know what it is.
Well, I would say, first of all, don't feel bad that, that you might be hiding a voice. It took me until, the grand old age of 40. Gosh, how old am I? I'm 43 now. I'm forgetting how old I am now, Henry Cameron. That's how old I'm getting. I think I was 40. It was after my birthday. So I was 43. So these last few years, I've been working as a content writer, copywriter, and a ghostwriter, which means I've been helping other people with their voice, not really giving myself a voice. So last year, when I decided that I would like to move from being a ghostwriter and writing books for other people to actually helping people write their own books and become a book coach, one of the first things I realized is I need to have a book of my own. Now that terrified me. And a lot of people find that really weird because they just kind of think, what? But you've written 7 books before. So why would you be terrified about writing this book? So it's a whole other thing when you're writing for yourself as opposed to writing for somebody else. I have a really good friend of mine based in London, and she is a session singer. So she's sang for quite a few famous, worldwide famous singers.
Mm-hmm.
And she's hired to go into the studio with them and sing backup vocals. Now, she has a fantastic voice, obviously. If she's being hired by these amazing artists, she's got a great voice. Looks fantastic as well. I know it shouldn't matter, but let's face it, in the recording industry, if you're easy on the eyes, that certainly helps. So I've always asked her, so why have you never thought about cutting your own album? Have you never thought about being your own singer instead of singing backup for somebody else? And she'd always say to me, the distance between where I stand and where the lead singer stands in recording studio is less than 10 feet. But emotionally, it might as well be a chasm. Right. No one looks at me unless I sing a bad note. Otherwise, no one's looking at me. All eyes are on the singer, the lead singer. And that's exactly how she likes it. She knows herself. She enjoys singing. She wants to just sing and make a good living, but she doesn't think she will cope with the scrutiny that comes from being a lead singer. Yeah. I never really understood what she was talking about until I wrote my own book and I had my own book launch. And oh my God, as a ghostwriter, you don't do that. You write your book and then you hand it over to somebody else and you get paid, you run off with your check, and there you go. So this has been it's been a very interesting last year for me in finding my own voice, especially because I've never been very vocal about some of the hardships that I've been through. I've never really talked about some of the racism that I've dealt with. I've never talked about, I had an addiction problem when I was 19. I became heavily addicted to amphetamines and ecstasy pills. And I was homeless for a year. So I was living in and out of homeless shelters. It's something I never really spoke about. I wasn't ashamed of it.
Yeah.
But I guess I was protecting my family. I didn't want them to know because I felt they would take it hard and they would blame themselves as family do. They think what I should have known somehow. I should have done something about it. You know, you were a parent. I'm sure you know what that. I know what happened to your son, and I bet you felt that you should have got there earlier. You should have done something more. But you know, you're only human. There's only so much you can do, but it's something that parents especially go through, and they always think that somehow they should have known, they should have been able to do something about it and prevented something bad happening.
Yeah.
So it's been difficult, and I've had to, you know, I had to have that conversation with my mother, who didn't even know about this past. So I had to have a conversation and just say, look, I'm going to become vocal about this. And she did what every parent would do, is like, why do you have to be vocal about this?
Right.
But this is what I'm talking about, you know, about finding your voice. And you know, if anyone's listening to this and feels like their voice is stifled, or they're more trying to hide their voice, one thing I've learned this last year, the biggest thing I've learned, is the more you tell people about your flaws, the more they gravitate to you, the more they like you. And now I wish I can go back in a time machine and speak to that young girl who was fronting the whole time and doing the whole, hey, I'm amazing, I can do anything. I can just go back to her now and say, wind your neck in, you know, there's no need for you to be that perfect. In fact, people think less of you because you're showing this perfect facade, because all that happens is either people believe that you're perfect and that makes you unapproachable, or they figure out that you're fronting and they don't like you because of it. Just one of those two things are going to happen. Instead, show the broken parts of you, show, you know, what is wrong with you, the mistakes that you've made, and you'll be amazed how many people actually gravitate to you and like you because of that.
Feel well, live well. Vox Life combines neuromuscular science with decades of proven research to help you achieve your wellness goals. Safe for all ages, drug-free, and with no invasive treatments, Vox Life products use the patented Vox HPT, a special tactile pattern that activates your body's neuroreceptors to reduce aches and pains, keeping you at maximum performance every day. Visit DianeDinkmeyer.voxlife.com for details. That's Vox Life, VOXX Life.
You know, there's that saying that break is where the light gets in, the crack is where the light gets in.
I love that. I've never heard that. I've never heard that before. I love that.
I think it's the opposite, though. I think it's where the light emerges from you, your real light. It emerges from who you are at the center of it all. I remember a story when I was in 4th grade. My teacher, who was really, really tall, to me, she was 10 feet tall, Mrs. Ardeline. And she had us drawing something, a picture of our house and our family or whatnot. And I didn't like what I had drawn. And I crumpled it up and I threw it across the room. And I sat there, little, what is that, 9-year-old Henry with a little storm cloud over my head because I was really unhappy. And she came up and she put her hand on my shoulder gently. And she said, "Oh, Henry, nobody's perfect." And I looked up at her and I said, "Mrs. Ardeline, how can I be any different than I am right now?"
Wow.
I thought I'm as perfect as I can be.
How precocious. I love that.
Right? I was very precocious, quietly precocious, but I was. And I still hold to that. I think we are as perfect as we can be in the moment that we're in. But the gift of our humanity is that we get to recognize that we can strive for better. And sometimes all it takes is permission. Permission is a powerful thing.
Yes.
Right? And so for people like yourself who are vocalizing and letting that light emerge through your cracks.
I love that. I love that. I love the scene that I'm getting in my head, the imagery I'm getting in my head. It's interesting that you said that, Henry Cameron. I did a workshop recently. It was called Finding Your Voice. And the slant of it was helping people find a unique angle or a unique positioning for their book. So that's the main reason, because a lot of people worry, especially when they're writing business books, the worry is, you know, Oh, but there's already a book about that. I've already seen a few books on Amazon that's similar. I don't want to be putting the same thing out. And
Oh,
I always say that's a bit like telling a singer-songwriter never to write a song ever again because all the chords and the combinations have already been done. So just don't bother. That's silly. There's people going to still want to write new music and write new songs and write new lyrics, no matter if it sounds similar to something else. In the same way, you can write about the same subject, but you just need to put your own unique angle to it. And the best way to put a unique angle is to speak from your heart by finding your true voice. So I did a workshop about that, but that was the main reason was to find a unique angle for your book. But what emerged from it, from a lot of the people that were in the workshop, is it's finding your voice in general, not just for a book, but who you are in the world.
okay.
And it's interesting that you said that, you know, from the cracks emerged this light. I didn't use that particularly. That's a really new one, which I'm now going to steal and start using. I hope you don't mind. I will credit you. Don't worry. But that's a new one on me. I'll definitely use that. But I was talking to them about how, you know, a lot of people assume finding their voice, especially when it comes to an angle for a book or their business or anything like that, they think it's a creative thing. They think that it needs to be manufactured or created. And I always say, no, your voice is something that's discovered inside of you. It's already in there and you
Already there.
need to dig it out. That's what it's not finding it externally. It's going internally and finding
Well,
out
I
who
was
you
telling you
are.
about the Steiner schools. The first year, the entire first year of a Steiner or Waldorf teacher's training is in their own biography.
Oh, wow.
What a beautiful gesture for educators to spend an entire year spelunking, like, you know, down into a cave of yourself, at your core, and really finding out what makes you tick based on your life experiences, the things that you have felt, the things that you have witnessed. And because that's going to be your biggest and best tool for guiding these young children, each of whom is developing their biography.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I feel very privileged to have partaken in some of that biography work. And I bring that into my life skills mentorship now, because it is really, like you say, it's really about digging deep and being true to who you are. That young woman and that little girl, they're still in there. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
still talk to them. You can still guide them. You can still reassure them that they are okay just as they are. They don't need to be any different. They're as perfect as they can be, but they can always be better. And we can
Yes.
always strive for better. But the foundation of that house has to be solid. It has to be clear. And I think that the more we can do to help people lay that foundation, no matter what age, no matter what stage of life or socioeconomic status, we can help them to build that house in a way that is of their own design and give them that
Absolutely.
expression, whether it's a book, whether it's a song or a poem, whether it's an engineering project, or whether it's teaching other children how to be in the world on their terms, right? And that's the key. It's on their terms.
That's
It's
it.
on
Yeah.
our terms, right? So as we wrap this up, I wish we could keep going and going. And going. We'll definitely have you back.
Yes. Thank you.
I always ask my guests to reflect on either three things that we've touched on, or maybe something that we haven't yet, um, that are sort of takeaways that listeners can take away from this experience, that can help them increase their life skills capacities
Okay.
in this time.
Three things. Well, first of all, I would say encompass everything. What I said before about finding your voice. Your voice is the sum total of everything that you've been through. So don't try and sanitize it, you know, don't take out the bad bits and leave in the good bits and that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Don't censor yourself, you know, be honest and upfront about who you are, what you're good at, what you're not so good at. I've always thought that the person that we lie to the most is usually ourselves, and that's sad, you know. And I've realized I've been lying to myself for a very long time. And it's only in the last few years late 30s going into my 40s, that I'm actually genuinely being who I am. The fact that it's taken me until the age of 43 to be honest about things I've gone through in my past. If you're a young person listening, don't wait until you're my age. Why would you want to do that? Do it straight away. Be true to who you are and be honest about who you are, and your life will be so much easier, and you'll be more guided to where you need to be. Not just in career, I'm talking about in relationships and everything. When you are yourself, you will be guided to the right place. And when you're not yourself, you will be guided to the wrong place because you're not being yourself,
Right. And
So that'll be
that'll change throughout your life. You're going to be a different self 10 years from now than you are now. And so that being true to yourself is in the moment that you're in, because that's all you've got, baby.
yeah.
Right now, who are you? Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, I don't think we touched so much on this, I would say, is one of my biggest regrets is that I never really spoke to my dad. I spoke to my dad in that we were close in the sense that, I hugged him. I never really was one to hug my mother. I would go and hug my dad. We used to hang out. I was always a daddy's girl. But I never really asked him about his childhood. I never really asked him. I got the feeling there was pain there. He saw the partition of India and so you must have seen some horrible things, because war's not exactly a nice business, is it? But I wish I know, and now it's gone. He died in 2007 and it went with him. So I would say, if you have parents, don't assume you know them. They were people before you turned up. I think it's, especially if you're in your teens or in your 20s, it's easy to see your parents as the sole purpose of this human being is to be your mother or to be your father. But that isn't their sole purpose. They were people before you, and they continue to be people without you around. They are, rounded individuals. Ask them more questions, take more interest in their lives. I've definitely, since losing my dad, I take more interest in my mother's life, and I ask her more questions about, well, whereas before we have a whole clan over in India. I'm related to half of the village, Henry Cameron. I'm not even sure how I'm related to some of these people, but there's a ton of people in India that I'm related to. Whereas before my dad's death, my mother would say, oh, so-and-so is coming there. And I'd be like, yeah, whatever. I just didn't care. Now it's like, no, tell me, how are they related to me? How does this work? I want to know the story, the backstory, why you know these people, how they became into your life, and that kind of thing. Just take more interest, because once they've gone, they are truly gone, and other people can tell you stories about them, but you will never get that first hand of what it felt like to be them. You would never get that. So I would say, ask some questions. There's some wonderful services now in the UK. I'm sure there are in the US as well, where you can actually get sort of like a memorial kind of book put together about the life of your parent. See if they'll be happy to do that and get something recorded. But people have the most ordinary people have extraordinary stories.
They do indeed.
It's now getting to the stage where I'm trying to find somebody who's actually ordinary. I can't find them. It's like, where's that ordinary person that has a boring, ordinary life? I don't meet them.
They don't exist. And the flip side of that too, for those parents and grandparents who are out there, I'm very fortunate that I had that connection with both my parents. From a young age, I was asking those questions of them and my grandparents and my great-grandparent. I was that kid.
Yeah.
For stories. And it really affected who I became as a storyteller, as an artist. And I think there's the other side of it as well, because children don't always, or young people don't always have that impulse or to really think of their parents as children or as youth or as adolescents. I think there comes a point in parenting where you move from, or where I think it ought to go, moving from being the sort of boundary setter and the authority figure. And then around middle adolescence, around 13 or 14, where you shift to becoming more of a mentor and learning how to communicate with your adolescent on their level. So rather than saying, no, you can't do this, and putting up all those walls, which you know they're going to kick down anyway, right? Say, let me tell you a story about when I was 14. And relate to them. And it's healthy for you too, parents, to for your youth so that you can better understand, because I think we forget. When we reach a certain age, we start to forget. It gets a little foggy, a little cloudy and dreamy, our youth. And so to really be able to use your biography as a tool for parenting, especially of adolescents, I think could be a game changer. So absolutely, that communication, story sharing, beautiful, beautiful. And what's number 3?
Oh gosh, number three. Well, I don't know. We've touched on a lot of things, haven't we, over the last hour? So I'm trying to think of a third point. A third point, I would say, probably would be going to my business. It would be just follow your heart. Look how long it took me to get to where I am. I was in the wilderness for a very long time. At the age of 25, I genuinely thought that was me done. I thought I was a washed up has-been at 25, and I spent nearly 2 decades doing different jobs and thinking this was going to be my life. The main thing that I really wanted to do had been snatched away from me. I even got into medicine just to honor my father's death, because he wanted me to be a doctor. Very typical, I know, Indian father, educated daughter wants her to be a doctor. I'm a walking, talking stereotype. And I never wanted to be a doctor, but after losing him and, the pain of losing my dad, I actually thought, well, why not? When my first love has already died a death anyway, why not pursue medicine if that's what my dad wanted? But it wasn't really what I wanted. And it was only in 2013 that I managed to find a way back into writing. So it's never too late. Keep following your heart and keep doing what feels right for you, and you will somehow find a way back.
Beautiful. And had none of that happened to you or from you or with you throughout your life, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
That's
if my son hadn't died from brain cancer at age 13, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
That's it.
And that's the message, isn't it? I mean, that's the power of the individual story, and telling, the act of telling our stories truly and without holding back and without, prettifying it. Raw and real. This is who we are. We are who we are because of where we've come from. Absolutely. And those cracks allow us to share our light. So thank you, Mitali, for sharing your light.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. And listeners, if you go down to the description box, you'll find out more about Mitali and her work and her link to her website, thefreedommasterplan.com. Find out more. And if you are seeking your voice in your business or on entrepreneurial level, please check out her book and buy it up, because it's give it as a gift, because there are a lot of us out there who are now finding our way again during this crazy, amazing time in human history. So we will talk to you again, Mitali. We'll have you back. Thank you. All the best and congratulations on the success of your book. And thank you again.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Season 2 of the Lost Traveler Podcast with Henry Cameron Allen. Visit me online at www.henryallen.org. Thank you to my guests, and thank you for tuning in. Let's keep striving for a better world together.